When your heart is tired but God is still moving, my dear brothers and sisters, let me ask you something that perhaps your heart has been wanting to ask for a long time, but your lips were too tired to say, Lord, where are you in all of this? If you have ever whispered that question through tears, through trembling, or through the heaviness of a heart that has carried more than it should, then this message today is for you. Because I believe with all my spirit, God brought you here right now, because you needed a reminder that you can relax, a reminder that God is protecting you, a reminder that God is guiding you, more than you think, more than you feel, more than you can see. Let me begin with a story. Many years ago, a man walked into my office, shoulders shaking, eyes dim, spirit crushed. He said, Pastor, I feel like I'm walking through life blindfolded. Every decision feels dangerous. Every day feels uncertain. I feel like the world is spinning faster than I can handle. I looked him in the eyes and said, My friend, then you are exactly where God can do His greatest work. For only when we stop relying on our sight do we begin to rely on His guidance. He didn't understand at the time. He wanted clarity. He wanted answers. He wanted instant peace. But God gave him something better, a journey that taught him God had been protecting him, even when he thought he was abandoned, guiding him even when he saw no direction, strengthening him even when he felt weakest. And today, I want to walk you through that same journey, not in a list, not in steps, but in a flowing, living message, 7 deep revelations from God that I pray will breathe peace into your soul, strength into your bones, and courage into your spirit. Let us begin. God's silence is not God's absence. Expanded to you 700 words, no subheadings, continuous emotional flow. There are seasons of life when you feel as if heaven has closed its doors to you. You pray, but nothing seems to shift. You cry out to God, but the walls feel too thick for your voice to pass through. You read scripture, but the words feel distant. You worship, but your heart feels numb. You sit in your room at night, staring at the ceiling, asking quietly, Lord, where are you? And the silence around you feels louder than any answer you were hoping to hear. But listen to me, my friend, God's silence is one of the most misunderstood expressions of His love. It is not abandonment. It is not distance. It is not punishment. It is preparation. It is protection. It is the evidence that God is working deeply, quietly, invisibly, beyond what your eyes can perceive and your heart can understand. Because silence is not inactivity. Silence is not absence. Silence is the divine strategy of a God who sees more than you, knows more than you, and cares for you more deeply than you could ever comprehend. Think of a seed buried in the ground. If you were to watch it day by day, you might think nothing is happening. The soil is still. The surface is quiet. There is no visible movement. But underneath, hidden in darkness, something sacred is taking place. Roots are forming. Strength is developing. Life is awakening. The greatest growth happens in silence, in hiddenness, in obscurity. And the same is true for you. When God seems silent, He is building roots in your spirit. He is strengthening areas you do not see. He is preparing breakthroughs you are not aware of. He is orchestrating answers you haven't even prayed for yet. There was a woman who once told me, Pastor, I think God has forgotten me. She had prayed for years for healing in her family, for restoration in her marriage, for clarity in her purpose. But every prayer seemed to echo back empty. She said, I feel like I'm knocking on a door that no one intends to open. I looked into her tired eyes and said, No, my daughter, God is behind the door, preparing something so beautiful that if He opened it too early, it would collapse under the weight of its own timing. And years later, when everything finally came together, her marriage restored, her home filled with peace, her purpose reignited, she came back to me with tears running down her face, saying, Pastor, now I realize God was never quiet. He was busy. Sometimes the noise of your disappointment makes you think God is silent. But God is often loudest in ways you cannot hear until later. God's silence protects you. If you knew everything God was doing, you would try to rush him. If you saw everything he was blocking, you might resist him. If he revealed the full plan, you might not have the maturity to handle it, the humility to walk in it, or the strength to sustain it. So he hides his work, not to keep it from you, but to prepare you for it. He hides his movement because what is growing is fragile. He hides his timing because your heart is still being shaped. He hides his plan because your enemies would attack it too early. There are blessings God keeps in secret chambers until your character, your patience, and your faith are ready to receive them. And sometimes God is silent because he is teaching you to hear differently. You see, if God spoke loudly every day, you would depend on the volume of his voice rather than the depth of his presence. But in silence, you learn to trust. In silence, you learn to wait. In silence, you learn to walk by faith and not by sight. In silence, you discover that God has been with you all along, not in the thunder, not in the fire, not in the earthquake, but in a still small whisper that grows clearer as your spirit grows quieter. So do not fear the silence. Do not interpret it as distance. Do not mistake it for rejection. God is closer than you think. He is working deeper than you know. He is positioning you for things you cannot yet imagine. One day you will look back and say, "Now I understand. Now I see what God was doing. Now I know why he was quiet. He was building something in me that required silence, stillness, and surrender." Relax. Trust. Breathe. God's silence is not God's absence. It is the sacred room where miracles are being prepared. When you feel weak, God is making you stronger. There comes a moment in every believer's life where the weight becomes too heavy, the journey too long, the exhaustion too deep. A moment where your hands tremble not because you are afraid, but because you are tired. Tired of holding on, tired of trying to be strong, tired of pretending everything is fine while your heart is quietly breaking. And in that moment, you may mistake your weakness for failure. You may think, if I were stronger, I wouldn't feel this way. If I had more faith, I wouldn't be struggling. But hear this truth that heaven wants to whisper into your weary spirit. Your weakness is not a sign that God has abandoned you. Your weakness is the place where God is building his greatest strength within you. Human strength is limited, divine strength is limitless. Human endurance breaks, divine endurance restores. Human power fades, divine power renews. And sometimes, God will allow your human strength to run out so you can finally discover the supernatural strength that comes from him alone. You see, as long as you rely on your own power, you will always reach a ceiling. You will always hit a wall. You will always reach the end of yourself. But when you reach that end, when your knees touch the ground and your hands lift in surrender, God begins where you stop. Heaven steps in when your strength steps out. And that is why your weakness is not your enemy. It is the doorway to God's strength. Think of David. Before he ever stood before Goliath, he stood alone in the fields, fighting lions and bears no one else knew about. There were no crowds cheering, no soldiers watching, no armies applauding. He faced battles privately that prepared him for victories publicly. In those hidden moments, David learned something powerful. Strength doesn't come from the spotlight. It comes from the struggle. And maybe that's what God is doing in your life right now. The battles you are fighting alone, the battles no one sees, the tears no one knows about, the fears you keep buried in your heart. These are the very battles that are constructing spiritual strength within you. Strength that will not break when life shakes you. Strength that will not bend when storms rise. Strength that will not collapse under the weight of pressure. There was a man who once came to me with tears in his eyes saying, "Pastor, I'm so tired of being strong. I'm tired of being the one everyone depends on. I'm tired of holding everything together, while everything inside me feels like it's falling apart." And I looked at him with compassion and said, "My son, maybe this is the moment where God is inviting you to stop being strong on your own and start being strong through Him. Because hear this, you were never designed to carry everything by yourself. You were never meant to fight alone. You were never meant to live dependent on human strength. That is why God allows you to reach moments where your strength fails, so His strength can finally take over. When you are weak, God is near. When you are weak, God is attentive. When you are weak, God leans in and whispers, 'My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in your weakness.' And sometimes the miracle is not that God removes the burden. Sometimes the miracle is that He strengthens you to carry it. Sometimes the testimony is not that the storm stops. Sometimes the testimony is that you learn how to walk through the storm without losing your peace. Sometimes God doesn't change the situation because He's changing you in the situation. Your weakness softens your heart. Your weakness deepens your compassion. Your weakness breaks your pride. Your weakness teaches you surrender. Your weakness trains you to depend on God more than yourself. Your weakness transforms your character into something purer, humbler, stronger, and more aligned with heaven. And this is why you should not despise weakness. It is shaping you. It is stretching you. It is refining you. It is preparing you for dimensions of purpose that require a strength not born from muscle, talent, or intellect, but born from divine empowerment. When you feel like you cannot go on, God lifts you. When you feel like you cannot stand, God steadies you. When you feel like you are about to break, God holds you together. When you feel like life has drained everything out of you, God fills you again. There is no weakness too deep for God to strengthen, no burden too heavy for God to carry, no exhaustion too great for God to revive. So if you feel weak today, do not be ashamed. Do not be discouraged. Do not believe the lie that you are failing. Instead, recognize this as a holy moment, a sacred invitation from God to experience His strength in a way you never have before. Your weakness is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of a new chapter where God becomes your strength, your power, your endurance, and your victory. Relax. Trust. When you feel weak, God is making you stronger than ever before. God is guiding you even when you don't know where you're going. There are seasons when life feels like you are walking through a fog, unable to see more than a few steps ahead. You try to plan, but the future feels blurry. You try to make decisions, but every path seems uncertain. You try to hear God clearly, yet all you receive are gentle impressions, quiet nudges, and subtle whispers that don't always make sense in the moment. And in those seasons, fear tries to convince you that you are lost. Anxiety whispers that you are falling behind. Doubt tells you that God is not guiding you. But hear me, even when you cannot see your next step, God is already standing in your tomorrow. Even when you don't know where you're going, He is guiding you with a precision, a love, and a wisdom that is greater than anything you could ever map out for your life. We love clarity. We love certainty. We love knowing what's coming next. But God does not lead us through explanations. He leads us through trust. Trust is not knowing the road. Trust is knowing the guide. Trust is not understanding every detail. Trust is believing that God has already taken care of the details. Trust is walking forward even when the road curves, bends, twists, and leads through unfamiliar territory. And sometimes, God intentionally withholds full direction, because if He showed you the whole journey, you would either try to skip steps or run away from the challenges that are necessary for your growth. Think of Abraham. God didn't hand him a map. God didn't give him a step-by-step blueprint. God simply said, "Go to the land I will show you." That means Abraham had to start walking without knowing where he would end up. He had to leave everything familiar, everything comfortable, everything predictable, and trust a God who promised to lead him. And the miracle is not that Abraham reached the promised land. The miracle is that he trusted God enough to move before he understood. The same is true for you. God doesn't always tell you where you're going, because he wants to teach you who you're following. There was a young man who once told me, "Pastor, I feel like I'm living in confusion. Nothing in my life makes sense." He had lost his job, relationships were shifting, and opportunities kept opening and closing unpredictably. He felt like he was wandering. But I looked at him and said, "My son, confusion is not the same as misdirection. You feel confused, but God is not confused. You feel uncertain, but God is certain. You feel lost, but God knows exactly where you are and exactly where He is taking you." Sometimes, the path God uses to guide you looks nothing like the path you expected, but unexpected paths often lead to unforgettable destinations. And here is the truth many people overlook: God guides us more through process than through answers. He guides us through closed doors just as much as through open ones. He guides us through delays just as meaningfully as through acceleration. He guides us through disappointments that strip us of false attachments. He guides us through relationships that shape us, refine us, and sometimes break us to rebuild us. He guides us through inner restlessness, not to frustrate us, but to shift us toward the right season. You see, God is the master of divine redirection. When He closes one path, it's because there is another path that leads closer to your purpose. And when He keeps you waiting, it's because the timing of the destination is as important as the destination itself. There are moments where you will feel like God is guiding you through shadows. Moments where His presence feels like a soft whisper rather than a loud command. But that is not to confuse you, it is to draw you closer. When God speaks quietly, He is inviting you to lean in. When He guides subtly, He is teaching you intimacy. When He reveals only one step at a time, He is strengthening your faith to walk with Him rather than rush ahead of Him. And trust me, God knows exactly how to guide you. He knows how to pull you back when you're going too fast. He knows how to nudge you forward when fear tries to hold you still. He knows how to block you from what would destroy you. He knows how to open doors that were locked for years. He knows how to align relationships, opportunities, conversations, and moments that propel you into the next chapter of your journey. Even when you don't realize it, God is guiding you. When you escaped something harmful you didn't see coming, that was God. When the job didn't work out because it wasn't right for your spirit, that was God. When the relationship fell apart because it would have held back your destiny, that was God. When you felt a sudden peace about a decision you were afraid to make, that was God. When you didn't understand the shift but felt a deep knowing inside, that was God. So do not panic when the path feels unclear. Do not fear when your future feels uncertain. Do not worry when the next step is not visible. You are not walking alone. You are being guided, step by step, moment by moment, breath by breath, by a God who sees the whole picture from beginning to end. Relax. Trust the unseen hand that is leading you. Even when you don't know where you're going, God is guiding you perfectly. The transformation begins within. Transformation is not something that arrives at your doorstep wrapped with a bow. It is not something that suddenly appears after a motivational speech, after a good day, or after you finally feel ready. Transformation begins the moment you choose to stop running from yourself and start facing the very things you have avoided your entire life. It begins inside you, quietly, powerfully, and uncomfortably. It begins the moment you say, "I cannot stay the same anymore." This step is where the real work begins, because transformation is not built on excitement. It is built on discipline. It is built on repetition. It is built on facing the mirrors you once walked away from. And most importantly, transformation is built on truth. The truth about what you've become. The truth about what you've tolerated. The truth about who you truly want to be. There is no transformation without truth, and there is no truth without courage. When you begin this stage, you will experience resistance. Not from the world, first from yourself. The old version of you will fight to survive, because it knows that if you elevate, it must die. That version of you that is comfortable, that is used to your old habits, old thinking, old fears, it will try to hold on. It will whisper, why change? Why push? Why grow? And this is where transformation separates the dreamers from the doers. Because dreamers listen to that voice. Doers silence it. This is the step where you learn to break your own patterns. Where you start showing up for yourself, even when you don't feel like it. Where you begin creating the life you want instead of accepting the life you're used to. In this step, small actions become powerful weapons. Waking up earlier, saying no to what drains you, saying yes to what strengthens you, replacing complaining with discipline, replacing fear with faith, replacing doubt with action. Transformation is not a single moment. It is a daily decision. There will be days when you slide backward, days when you feel stuck, days when you question if you are even changing at all. But understand this, transformation is slow on the surface and explosive beneath it. The roots grow long before the tree rises. The development happens in silence before it ever becomes visible to the world. You might not notice the progress immediately, but one day you will look back and realize you no longer think the same. You no longer react the same. You no longer break the same. That is transformation. This stage also demands self-control. You cannot transform while still entertaining the habits that break you. You cannot transform while still feeding the distractions that steal your focus. You cannot transform while still keeping the people who drain your energy. Transformation requires pruning, removing the things that slow your growth, even if they once brought you comfort. You must be willing to outgrow environments, conversations, and versions of yourself that no longer match where you're going. This is not selfish. This is survival. The deeper you go into this step, the more you realize transformation is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to the person you were meant to be. Beneath the fear, beneath the doubt, beneath the pain, beneath the expectations of others, there is a version of you that is strong, disciplined, courageous, unstoppable. Transformation is the journey back to that version. To truly transform, you must also learn forgiveness. Not for others first, but for yourself. Forgive yourself for the years you wasted. For the chances you didn't take. For the times you knew better, but didn't do better. For the moments you let fear win. Transformation cannot happen in a heart that still holds shame. Release it. Let it go. You are not who you were. You are who you are becoming, and that deserves grace. Finally, transformation requires vision. Seeing the life you want even when it feels far away. Holding on to the picture of your future self until you become it. When you transform, you do not chase results, you become the kind of person who creates them naturally. You rise, you elevate, you evolve. And one day, without even noticing it, the world will look at you and say, "You've changed." And you will smile knowing the truth: you didn't change. You finally became yourself.